underwater scene ever made for Avatar feels a bit off. You can see the lack of resistance in the water and everything moves a little too quickly, kinda like a video game. And now this is what an underwater scene from the new Avatar looks like. Quite literally the best computer-generated water we have ever seen in cinema. How is that possible? Well, even though the CGI just got better in 13 years, there's also something else going on here. Because what if I told you the first shot wasn't filmed underwater? This technique is called dry for wet, where you film everything on dry land with the actors hanging in cables, mimicking the movements as if they were in water. You can get away with this trick if it's a short action-packed scene in cloudy water, but how did they go from this to this? Well, it leaves only one way out, because if you can't fake it, you do it for real. You have to become one with water.
This is what it is, okay? I said empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water.
Improvise, adapt, overcome. That is the blueprint for creating something no one has ever done before. Underwater performance capture.
Now water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend.
But you might be thinking, filming underwater has been done before, right? Like for Mission Impossible, Harry Potter, and even in the 1900s they managed to do so. But here's why Avatar stands out. You probably noticed that the suits the actors are wearing are covered in dots. This technology is called motion capture, and every single one of those dots is able to capture the slightest movement and facial tic of an actor. These performances can then later be mapped onto digital imagery, which is the reason why their expressions and movements look so real, simply because they are real. Supposedly, George Lucas was the first to ever try motion capture for Star Wars, but he didn't like how it looked, so he cut it out.
Oh, so we spent $100,000 on that suit that we didn't need to spend.
All jokes aside, if you want to use this technology underwater, you're running into quite some issues. To give a little indication of what they had to go through, you can't use scuba tanks underwater because it will interfere with the cameras. Underwater 3D cameras did not exist at the time, and how do you not fall into the trap of making things look too real to the point where it becomes fake? To solve these problems, you need someone who knows the way of water, an expert that has made the underwater world his way of life, and that person is director James Cameron himself. Because water has played quite a significant role in Cameron's films and life in general. His two great passions are filmmaking and diving. Not only is he the man who decided to build a Titanic life-size replica for his world-famous movie, he also dove down in a submarine to the actual ship 12 times in his life. He also had some practice during his logistically boggling underwater debut, titled The Abyss, which was shot in an abandoned nuclear plant that he had filled with millions of gallons of water. And to top it all off, after making the first Avatar, he broke the record for diving solo to the deepest trench on planet Earth. That's 11,000 meters, calling attention to the need for more deep-sea research. It's safe to say that Cameron knows his way around water. So they built a giant tank in a studio, which is basically an indoor ocean, where they could adjust the speed of the water and height of the waves. They used underwater jetpacks like these ones, and rideable scooters that were shaped like underwater creatures. This way they could record people trying to get out of the water while they're getting hit by a wave, or film realistic interaction with the creatures on what they called the racetrack, where they could go full speed while the actors were hanging on to them. But now that we have water, there's one tiny hiccup. As I mentioned before, the actors were not able to use oxygen tanks while filming, because every one of those air bubbles is a little wiggling mirror, and the system that's trying to read all the marker dots on the actor's body is like because it can't tell the difference between a marker dot and a bubble, which meant that everybody who was working in the tank had to hold their breath. Cameron said in an interview that if there was somebody down there holding the light, they were holding their breath. Same for camera operators and of course the actors. This meant that the actors had to undergo one whole year of intense training to adapt to the underwater environment. Even though they had to get scuba trained, they didn't use it. It was just to adapt to being underwater for long periods of time.
We did work with world-renowned free divers that train Navy SEALs, and he was training us for weeks and months, gets us in a meditative state, and he helps us lower our heart rate. He helps us learn how to, through breathing techniques, like put a lot more oxygen into our bloodstream and eliminate a lot more carbon dioxide so that we can sustain our breath.
But what's up with all these opaque balls on the water surface? Well, there was another issue. The cameras had a hard time focusing on the white motion trackers again, but this time due to light reflections. So James Cameron pulled a trick out of his hat from back in the days, because just like for The Abyss, he used thousands of beads to cut light reflections in the water, without obstructing the actors from reaching the surface if they needed to. So they basically functioned as a huge floating diffuser.
Horrific little black beads that all of us, I'm sure, have somewhere tucked deep in the folds of our bodies still to this day.
James Cameron is known for encouraging actors to go for that extra mile, which resulted in Kate Winslet breaking the underwater filming record, holding her breath for 7 minutes and 15 seconds.
It was 7:15.
That's very impressive, but we also gotta give credit to the stunt team that consisted of synchronized swimmers and Olympic hopefuls.
The wet team, their breath holds are amazing. One of my top guys, his breath hold is like 11 minutes down there, which is ridiculous.
Then there's also the challenge of acting emotionally as if you were in the actual environment. But how do you do that if your surrounding looks like a studio instead of Pandora? Well, on the one hand, they had built a digital world that you could walk around in with an iPad. James Cameron could see it all happen in real time with this monitor and then show it to the actors after their take. But for both movies, he also took the actors on what he called a sense memory odyssey. He would go live and hike in the forests of Hawaii to make the actors observe, feel, and smell the environment, to make them aware of how they would have to move. They held their freedive training in Hawaii as well, to quite literally let the actors soak in the underwater scenery, so that when they come back into a pretty sterile environment, they can recall that experience from their imagination.
Some of them have likened it to, black box theater, no set, no lighting, no nothing, just the other people. And so their emotional axis in the scene is not distracted by anything. It's just that other actor, They have that with each other. That's all they need. That's all actors need, is an emotional reality.
That's why James Cameron prefers using the term performance capture over motion capture, because at the end of the day, it's the performance that really matters.
This family is our fortress.
Now, when it comes to shooting underwater in 3D, the camera had to adapt as well, unless you want to use this unit of an IMAX camera. 3D cameras used to be huge and heavy in general, but for the first Avatar, James Cameron worked with Sony to develop this bizarre looking but lightweight camera system, with one camera pointing up and one straight ahead. This rig completely reshaped how 3D movies could be shot, because now they were able to shoot with a 3D camera on the shoulder in a virtual environment, which was something that was unheard of. To put that camera underwater, Sony managed to split the camera body in half so that only the lens and the sensor had to be underwater to make the rig more compact. The footage would finally be transferred to the surface with a cable, where the image was processed. This brings us to the image itself. How do you make it look real? Which is where you and I come into play. Because with a movie like Avatar, we go to the cinema with the intention to enter this new world. And during this time we temporarily suspend our disbelief, meaning we let go of critical thinking in order to believe this new reality for the sake of enjoyment. But in order to do so, the image has to be as seamless and immersive as possible, making you forget you're watching a movie, which is the reason why James Cameron shoots all of his movies in 3D.
Count the number of eyes in my face. There's 2 of them, and you've got 2, and All God's Chillin' got 2, and pretty much every animal, every insect's got at least 2, every fish has got 2. We experience the world through a stereoscopic system, a visual system, and when you see stereo, it gives you an enhanced sense. It triggers little regions in the brain that make you feel like you're really there. Well, what do we want to do with a movie like Avatar or the sequels? We want to take you to Pandora. We want you to live it, breathe it, feel that for that moment, for that period of time, those hours that you're in the dark theater, that this is a real place.
3D, when done right, which not many movies have done in the past, makes it feel like you're really there. The challenge, however, is to make things not look too real to the point where it becomes fake. The Hobbit trilogy, for example, was entirely shot at a super smooth 48 frames per second, but had been widely derided for the film's over-extreme clarity and soap opera effect, showing that more is not always better. The Way of Water solved this by using a new technique called motion grading, which allowed them to switch between the look of the standard 24 FPS in scenes where people were talking and use higher frame rates for action scenes. It's very much like color grading, where the filmmaker changes colors scene by scene, allowing characters or worlds to have a different color palette and feel. And all of this happens on a subconscious level. Nobody is gonna sit there and be like, damn, that motion grading looks sick. But if it weren't there, you would notice. So in the end, by recording hundreds of hours of waves hitting rocks, wind ripples on the surface of water, the movements of seaweed, and Cameron himself providing reference material from his own deep sea dives, VFX company Weta managed to create an AI that is able to generate unique water particles that definitely made things look wetter. What's crazy to realize is they not only had to be ahead of the curve while they were filming, but also 7 years down the line, meaning right now. Because once you've solved the problem of fake CGI water, you never have to solve it again. That's why, in my opinion, The Way of Water deserves the hype. Not only is it James Cameron's homage to marine exploration and the beauty that lies beneath our surface, the technology that they have created is also a step forward for the film industry as a whole, meaning we can explore a whole new realm of filmmaking. And the beauty of it all is that telling a story about learning the way of water started with a production process that was all about understanding water in the first place.
In making a movie set on Pandora, Pandora doesn't exist. Which means we are not only designing everything in the world piece by piece, but building it, either in a virtual world or practically on physical sets.
One of the main challenges of designing something from the ground up is not just the design itself, but it's all the details.
To design every single thing in a world, every blade of grass, every leaf, every flower, every bug, it's daunting, but it's fun.
The challenge of designing for Jim, whether it's on the technical side or the natural side, is in Jim's mind, all this stuff is real. We're not making a movie, we're filming some reality that just happens to exist on another planet.
We decided that there were two worlds in collision. You've got the human world, which is highly technological and highly recognizable to us. And then we split off the world of Pandora, the Na'vi, the creatures, the plants, everything in it.
We're introduced to this whole new world where we have beautiful tropical islands, but also there's a culture that lives in this very large mangrove called the Metcaina. And they have built their whole village suspended over the water under these roots. What's beautiful about Reef Village is that it very much exemplifies the Na'vi belief in connectivity.
This is our home now.
When we are designing creatures for Avatar, we often start with metaphors. The Tulkun is evocative of a whale, but when you look at it, this is not a whale at all. There's many, many different things different with it. You may not literally know exactly what is referencing, but you feel it.